Hello! Today we are talking about the cars of the Badlands in Cyberpunk 2077. First, let me say I tried to record this as a video, but as I'm about to show you, things didn't go so well. Seizure warning. The video capture flickers in ways the actual game did not, and I have no idea why or how to fix this. So I'll spare your eyes from the torture that seeing these as a video would cause, and just do this as pictures. I will be testing each vehicle and giving my opinion on how they handle so you can find the best rides to get around in. All vehicle testing was done by creating a track that starts at the filling station in the southwest Badlands and racing up to the dam nearby, which is about 2.7 kilometers as far as the game says. This gives nice straightaways and some crazy curves and turns. It also gives us a hill climb and a downhill race when we return back to the fueling station. It also gives us a chance to do a full 360 and see how well the car does at that. Actually, almost twice, because there's one turn at the bottom of the hill that is nearly a 360-degree turn. And that should give us a pretty good idea of how the car is going to handle. First up is the Thornton Galena G240 Gecko. The Gecko can get up to about 180 miles per hour, I believe. It could be kilometers since that's what the distance is given in, but that seems kind of low for a top speed of these vehicles. So I'm going to assume that they meant miles per hour, but it's hard to say. Anyways, you can get up to 180. It actually does an almost controlled 360-degree turn. It is fairly quick on its acceleration at the low end, but it tends to want to try to cap out at around 120 miles per hour, which it can reach very quickly, but everything from 120 to 180 takes a progressively longer time to reach. It is, however, one of the cheapest at 21,000 credits. That makes it really affordable to buy. However, it has some downsides. It's prone to what I like to call bounce, where the vehicle doesn't handle bumps and disturbances very well, so it likes to bounce when it hits these, and that easily sends the car in all sorts of odd directions that we don't really want to be going. It also fishtails really easily. This means that the back end of the vehicle goes and shifts position from where we want it to be to where the line of motion takes it, which is probably not where we want it to be. This means in a lot of cases it overcompensates and it has a tendency to spin because of that, which is good if you want it to spin a lot, but not so good if you're trying to take a turn. You're very likely to go and overturn and end up hitting something or someone, which is not so great. It is also terribly bad at both hill climbing and downhill racing because of that fishtailing that it does. You obviously are going to have a harder time keeping this thing from hitting something when you swing around those turns, and that's even when you're trying to do some fancier moves like drifting. Next up we have the Thornton Colby CX410 Butte Little Mule design. This is one of the smaller, you might want to call it an SUV, but it's a small truck really. It has a fairly low end cap. It gets to about 150 miles per hour, which in this game is not terribly high. It is actually very controllable though, and can do a controlled 180-degree turn fairly easily, though not necessarily a full 360. And when it does this, it's going to be doing this at a fairly low speed, because that's pretty much how it works. And I'll get into this a little more in a bit here. Its price isn't too bad though. It's $49K, and it is very stable. with very good tire grip as well. So it's very easy to handle. You probably won't have problems with oversteer. You probably won't have problems taking a turn in it. And that's really why it's an okay hill climber and downhill racer. But then we get into its downsides. It has incredibly slow acceleration compared to most of the cars. In particular, you can get it up to about 110 before it basically does not want to accelerate anymore. You still have about another 40 miles per hour, kilometers per hour that it can reach, but this takes a very, very long time to reach. So long, in fact, that none of my straightaways could actually get me up to 150. I had to find something extra special where I had more than 2 kilometers of straightaway to run to actually get it to accelerate to its full speed. Next up, we have the Quadra Type 66 Javelina. This can get up to about 190, which is a very good speed since the highest in the game is 200. It is probably my favorite in the game because it turns on a dime, and unlike a real car, it turns from the very center of the car, which is very useful if you can take advantage of that fact. It also is capable of a controlled 360-degree turn, so you can actually spin the cart entirely around and end up going the other direction and still have quite a bit of speed built up when you do that, and you don't end up flying off to one side or the other. And it also has a fairly quick acceleration curve where it can reach around 130 to 140 very easily. It still takes a bit longer to reach the full 190 it's capable of getting up to, but it doesn't take that much longer than it does to get to a fairly decent speed already. In fact, it gets up to the speed of the Thornton Colby Little Mule, and it still has more headroom on top of that. It's fairly mid-priced at $73K, which can be expensive early on, but it's not the most expensive car in the game, and for what you get, it's actually probably a good price. It also has good tire grip, not quite in the same league as the Little Mule, but it does a fairly good job. It's also decent as a hill climber and as a downhill racer, but it does have some downsides. The first one is that you find it way down in the southwest in the protein farms. It is well out of the way of most of the quests in the game, so you're not going to be in the general area where it is, and you're going to have to make a special trip to get to it. It is also a bit long for a vehicle, and I say this because of the fact that it drifts along that center line like I mentioned earlier. So when you take a sharp turn, if there's a guardrail there, there's a good chance the back of the car, the tail end, is going to hit that railing, which is not the best thing. But if you're aware of it and you think ahead and you can take the turn a little bit earlier than you might otherwise, you can usually get around that. And it's not the worst if you happen to hit the railing. Usually you're not going to flip over or do some crazy stuff because of it. But it is Cyberpunk 2077, so you never really know. It also can fishtail a bit. Not as bad as other rides like the Gecko, but it still has a bit of that wobble in it that can make it overcompensate if you take a turn too hard. And now we have the Cheyenne MZ2 Coyote. This is one of the fastest cars in the game. It can reach 200 miles per hour kph, whatever it actually happens to be. It can do a controlled 360-degree turn, It's only slightly less agile than the Javelina that we just covered, and it has insane acceleration. It is so fast at accelerating, it can actually hit 150 to 160 and not even be slowing down yet. That can be very useful if you were racing. It can also, though, lead to you going much, much faster than you expect to be, which can be an issue. It is a very good hill climber, though. It basically has all the things a real-life hill climber would want, which is that it has very high acceleration because of a powerful engine, and it has decent ability to get around the turns. In fact, it also has decent tire grip, which is also important to that, so you can usually trust it to stay on the road. It does have some downsides, though. First of those is that it costs 115,000 credits, which is fairly expensive early on, and is still not exactly cheap even in the late game. But if you're rolling in money, then this is one of your cheaper options for a high-performance vehicle. The next thing is that it is very prone to bounce. This is just like what you see in the Gecko. It hits even the smallest thing and it is going to get some airtime. That's not so great because as far as it goes, the Coyote is so fast that when it hits a bump like that, it's going to keep going in whatever direction you set off around that, and you lose any ability to maneuver while it's doing that. With as fast as it goes, this can mean that you go 10 feet or more in a given direction before you actually get a chance to compensate, which can be sort of a pain. It is also one of the easier ones to fishtail in. It loves to send that back end sliding around, and that leads into the last negative for it. It is not so great as a downhill racer. When you're going downhill, it's got more acceleration on it than you do climbing up, and because of that, it easily fishtails into every curve. And because it's so fast, you will often smash the back end into a railing and shoot straight over the railing. And if you're on the twisty hills and you're coming down them, that usually means you fly over the railing and down a cliff, which you really don't want to. Lastly, we are going to talk about the missing Badlands car. All the Badlands cars are a variation on another car that's already in the game. And actually another one that you should be able to get in the very first starting area. In fact, you can buy it in the starting area in its normal form. That is the Quartz ECT2 R660. It's a middling car when it's in the starting area, but there are available versions of it as a Badlands car. Most of these can be found among the Wraiths, but there is also a Aldecado version of this that you can find during one mission, and that's the only time you actually get to drive one of these Aldecado versions, but you can find the Wraith ones fairly commonly. This little beast performs somewhere between the Javelina and the Coyote. Because of this, I actually wish I could buy it in the game. It's not quite as fast as the Coyote, and it's more along the top speed of the Javelina, but its handling, because it's smaller than the Javelina, is much, much better. In fact, it's a lot like the Coyote as far as its cornering ability goes, but it has that same nice center line and tight grip to the road that the Javelina has. And it is at least just as fast as the Javelina, if not a little bit faster. It's easy to confuse with the Gecko, though, because the two are going to look fairly similar if you're looking at them from the front and you don't get a good glimpse at it, which is why some people might not even notice that this version is out there in the Badlands. But if you happen to take down some wraiths, this is a fun little car to play with. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.